Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a while since yours sincerely was active on this channel due to commitments. We are back and we are going to talk about the ill, the plague called anti-Semitism. The part of the victims, the branch of the victims that nobody mentions. That's the Igbo people. There was a time being seen as a Jew was believed to be filled with disadvantages. I'm sure you know about this. A lot of academics, the success of the state of Israel, democratization of the world, have somehow routinized, normalized, and I mustn't fail to mention the improvement of Christianity in some ways. Christianity is no longer officially anti-Semitic. Somehow reduced the animosity felt towards the identity Jew. When people read the New Testament now, they don't take it literally that the Jews killed God. But there was a time such thinking was prevalent in the world. People read about the experiences of Jesus and they build up animosity about whoever is called a Jew. At that era, nobody really wanted to be identified as a Jew because the identity was filled with disadvantages. Do you know what? At that time, I'm talking about 100 years ago, 150 years ago, everybody freely accused. For those that did not like the Igbos, they accused the Igbo people. I'm talking about the Igbo people that we know as Nigerians today. They were accused of being Jews. But those that were not haters said they were Jews. And interestingly, the people themselves said we were Jews. Well, over time, things have changed a little due to the circumstances I mentioned. Democratization of the world. I want to mention this. Fascism, by whatever name you want to call it, authoritarianism, totalitarianism, Nazism, are not comfortable with these people whom freedom is part of their second nature. Remember, the Igbos built the first democracy in the world, participatory democracy. And the Jewish community in Europe, the leaders of the community, the elders and the rabbis, we are not kings. So, with the world moving towards democracy, the animosity towards the Jewish people is reducing. So the Jewish identity is no longer targeted as it was targeted. So you now find people liking to say, we are Jewish. But in those days, when the world was filled with autocrats, kings, when they were not kings, they were like Hitler. When they were not emperors, they were like Stalin, Mussolini. Nobody wanted to be Jewish. But in those days, Igbos did not deny that they were Jewish. When we open the books, people will be alarmed and shocked. And since the world has moved positively in some ways, there is still anti-Semitism, but the Jewish identity doesn't attract hatred the way it used to attract. What does the anti-Semite think in relation to the Igbos today? what they think about the Jews is a different thing. We may come to that. But what do they think about the Igbos, who we are also called Jews, but who have other identities, like Igbo, which means Hebrew, African, black. What the anti-Semites thinks today is that it is time to stop accusing the Igbo people of being Jews. They are thinking, if we don't, they will also begin to be respected the way Jews are respected in the world today. More appreciated and less persecuted. They are thinking that if we continue to refer to them as Jews, the advantages that have come in replacement to those disadvantages will come to the Igbos. For example, if we continue to call them Jews the way we were calling them 100 years ago, the historical persecution that this ethnic group has suffered, people will begin to question it. Even the enemies of the Igbos will not doubt, will not dispute that this group has been treated very badly. But nobody is referring to it as anti-Semitism because there are other identities alongside the Jewish identity that they have. So in some ways, their Jewish identity is being denied, even though they are persecuted. But if their identity Jewish comes to the fore, people will recognize that anti-Semitism is the reason why they are treated differently from others. So the anti-Semite thinks the time to accuse them of being Jews has passed. The time to accuse them of not being Jews is now. And there is another reason why the anti-Semite thinks it's good to assimilate. I mean, it's good to deny that the Igbos are Jews. Genocide has so weakened the Igbos that they're not ready to look at their history. In order to appear grand, a lot of them, or some of them, make up stories about how they were the first people to exist in the world, how they existed before Abraham, how they existed before Adam. Opening the books does not put food on the table. So with these beliefs, what happens is that they begin to aspire to be like those that hate them. They stop aspiring to retain, to be their true identity, which means the anti-Semite has won. So, and I would say that they have won because if not for the valiant efforts of Omenala defenders, which I'm its Secretary General, Igbo land may be called Africa today. Igbo land may be called Africa today. The strategy of the anti-Semite today, which is destroy the Igbos by destroying their Israelite identity, showed us when all the rags, it showed up when all the rags, I'm referring to newspapers here, in Nigeria reported that DNA testing revealed that Igbos do not have Jewish DNA, quote. There was a time some jokers claimed that they had the Igbo DNA analyzed. Because I already had a report of my DNA, I did not take them serious. I knew they couldn't have been serious. But we have some Igbos who are not serious, who thought they could benefit from them, so they cooperated with them. They went and did some irresponsible things and claimed they had analyzed the Igbo DNA, that it is not Jewish. So what they did was, if we are to believe that they did anything, was to get the DNA samples of some Igbos and compare it with some people that they assumed were Jews. Meanwhile, they themselves were not Jews. Those people were not Jews. Those people that the Igbos collaborated with, that some Igbos allegedly collaborated with, were not Jews. And what they did was, I repeat, they got the DNA samples of some Igbos, compared it with the DNA materials of some people living today, and said they did not match, and that to them meant that the Igbos did not have Jewish DNA. I thought that the responsible thing to do, to know if Igbos have Jewish DNA, if you want to use the term Jew, is to find out the DNA of Jacob. But of course I knew that even if you found the DNA of Jacob, what are you going to find? Jacob's mother was not an Israelite, was not Jewish. She was Aramean. So are you telling me that she would not also have that Jacob would not have the genes of Rebecca? So I knew that that was a non-starter, but the press in Nigeria reported this because they were happy that the gambit of proving, of now convincing the Igbos and convincing the world that the Igbos are not Jews is working. Because if the Igbos are believed not to be Jews, Igbos will not benefit from the advantages that come with being Jewish today. I have reiterated the most important. If you are Jewish today, persecution is recognized as anti-Semitism. But none of those newspapers that wrote about the non-mashing of something that doesn't even exist, there is nothing existing in the world called Jewish DNA. None of them have ever bothered to write that from the Middle East to South Africa, the only places in the last 100 years, in the last 150 years, that Kibbutzim rose up were in the state of Israel and in Igbo land. I hope you know what Kibbutzim is. The Kibbutzim were the building blocks. They were among the building blocks of the establishment of the state of Israel. We have communities of Jews that are recognized by the World Jewish Congress, World Zionist Organization in South Africa, by the Jewish Agency in South Africa, and a lot of countries in Africa, and of course on the rim of the Mediterranean. None of them set up Kibbutzim. The only place where Kibbutzim was set up was in Igbo land. None of these papers wrote this. I don't know if you know the importance of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that an institution that you found or you find only in the state of Israel, I could even include Europe, the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic Jewish communities in Europe are recognizably Jewish. They did not set up Kibbutzim. Kibbutzim were only set up in Israel and in Igbo land. No paper wrote it. Because it plays into the agenda of the anti-Semites for the Igbos to be denied their identity. Just as it plays into their game too for the Ashkenazi to be denied their identity. But I will get into that later. I will now talk about proof that I'm an Israelite. The most substantial proof is my religion and culture is Zomenana. The ancient Israelite knew his religion as culture, religion you do in the land. Translate Zomenana to English, it is culture, religion you do in the land. And only the Israelites folkway has this description. Culture, religion you do in the land. The Yoruba, the Fulani, the English, the Russian, the Arab religions and cultures are not described as religions and cultures you do in the land. The only religion, culture, that has this description of culture you will do in the land is the Israelite religion. And that is what the Igbos call culture and religion. That is the number one proof that the person talking to you here is an Israelite. Not just a descendant of Israelites, but an Israelite. The other one is the historical persecution of the Igbo people. The historical persecution of who? The Igbo people. The persecution that the Ashkenazi have gone through is paralleled by the persecution that the Igbos have gone through. Then the crime of crimes. That's another proof that I'm an Israelite. The Igbo genocide. The second worst genocide in the 20th century. And the third, or the fourth, is I had said it in passing. Go to my Heritage Incorporated or ask me and I will provide you with the information. My DNA samples was compared to the DNA samples of the populations in the Middle East. They match. This proves that there was a migration from the Levant to what we know as West Africa today. If my ancestors were not in the Levant, I don't see why my DNA materials will match the DNA materials of peoples that are in Egypt, in Israel, in Iraq, in Iran. And when you go into deeper analysis, you discover that some people that would have been Ilona today, Ilona is my family name, are Ukrainians, Latvians, Germans. That's it. So, on this note, Shabbat Shalom. We are not saying things that will make people happy. We are saying things that will make people to think. Thank you and have a peaceful and restful Shabbat. Thank you.